Anyone remember the ducket? 5 Uttoxeter Road, 5 High Street? Must be the last survivor of the potteries. All used to be whitewashed and perfectly clean. Paper hanging on the nail. And a little kitchen, a little kitchen window. And a small back door. What small people they must have been. All boarded up now, getting ready for demolition. And the yard with the old blue sets. And the remains of where the wall used to be whitewashed and very black. A landing window. We call it a landing because it wasn't a proper bedroom. Where Geoff and I used to sleep later. Next door, the other side of the entry. Initially, of course, it was not covered in. What turned out to be our kitchen, top part. It's halfway up with brick, straight out into the open, a standpipe. No hot water, just a pipe in the yard. And that still applied when I left in 1953 to get married. Used to boil all the hot water on the open fire in the living room. Hard to imagine how many people lived in conditions like this. Next doors, Bellas, the newsagents. And the corner where the ball used to go. We used to get told off. And the posh kitchen, at least we thought it was posh in those days. It was all modernised, she had it all, the old part demolished and rebuilt. Not only that, she had what in those days was a very posh outhouse or toilet flush system. And then rebuilding that, unfortunately, she blocked the back entrance with her coal house, which effectively meant that all the rubbish, the dustbin and the coalman had to pick his bin up and from there walk all the way up the few steps up to the yard and through the kitchen, through the living room, through the shop and out at the front. And all the rubbish, the dustbins and the lot of rubbish in those days, hot ashes, etc., would go through. And when he delivered the coal, he had to come the opposite way. And this wall at the back, you could hear all the sorters there and the pot bank behind. And the same there. And then towering above all that was a bottle kiln, which has now been demolished. We used to play cricket in this yard. Hard to visualise now. So very little daylight. Like everyone else, you thought nothing of it. And very little left of the buildings behind. And unfortunately, or fortunately, at long last there's a demolition order on these buildings which were condemned before the First World War. Believe it or not. We'll now try and get some pictures inside. Just back outside again in the yard. Also what was familiar was very tall chimney stacks, and I see that the original pots are still there. It was always very warm. And Mum always used to keep a terrific fire, always warm and cosy. Looks as though the bird's nest in it at the moment. You can see him poking around at the top there. And away he goes. The chimney pot from the bedrooms been removed from the stack by the side of the wall there. Another feature, of course, was the brown, what would you call it, waste disposal, like the brown sinks, and the tiny grid at the end. This was, of course, because all the washing used to be done in tubs, and we used to empty it to save it all running down the yard, or at least help, and pour it away. And there were quite large volumes of water, so it assisted. We couldn't get away straight away, would lodge in a sort of sink-like trough. Having moved inside now, this is at the rear end of the kitchen where the boiler used to stand, the old-fashioned boiler. Used to stoke underneath. The days when it used to take a day to wash. This having been moved out to the corner of the kitchen, which I hope to film later on. And there's the old standpipe and the cold water tap and the sink and the little window looking outside. Next to it used to stand the stove and the washer, or the mangle. All very tiny and compact. And on the back wall here, which again was built up specially, so it should all be covered in. Used to be all cupboards similar to the one you see on here. Shelves as well, which made it quite private from next door. Hard to visualise that at one time, when little Ma, as we knew, that's my father's mother, was living with us, there were 5 adults living in under these conditions. Needless to say, the dustbin, of course, wasn't there. That was outside in the yard. And turning round from the back door, up a little step into the living room, kitchen, as we called it in those days. And the room I'm standing in we used to know as the back kitchen. None of your posh words in those days. And just look how small people must have been when you see the height of that doorway. Must only be 5 foot at the most. Having come in through that tiny little door, see that there's still the original cupboard which all the crocks used to be kept in, and the side of that, underneath that cupboard there, was the sewing machine, if I remember right. And then just to the left was the stair door which led upstairs to the little twisting narrow stairs. That has now been taken away, replaced by all these wall fittings, and the stairs is now being where in the middle of what was the kitchen, and obviously a new door which we shall traverse up eventually. And behind this here was the window. Used to be a little settee there, and a small chair somewhere there, And right up in the corner, which I doubt if you can see due to the fittings, was where the original boiler was kept, which we had taken out, and just a hole underneath. And I know Geoff used to keep his record player up there. And where this fitting is was where the old grate was, black leaded, etc. There's the original beam. Used to light by gas mantle. Sixpence I think they used to cost from Woolworths. Used to break it quite often. And the other side was where the step is, was the entrance up into the shop. And there, to the left there, was the wardrobe. And on the wall was the clock and another little wardrobe. You see how tiny these places were. Just imagine 5 adults, although none of us were very huge, used to live quite comfortably in these conditions. And behind that fitting was another door which used to lead under the stairs, and that was the pantry where the food was kept. Impossible to visualise, isn't it, these days? And when you consider how many people used to be packed into parties, 50 and 60 at a time, in the shop and the living room. Happy days. The days of family gatherings. I would say that the overall measurements of this room would be approximately 12 foot at its longest and 10 foot at its widest, but the 10-foot part would only be just under here, because then to jut out the entrance of the stairs you knock another 2 foot off, so 12 by 8 most of it. And there used to be a table in the middle, a chair there, that's a tea where I'm standing, and other chairs as well. And we used to walk round the table. Anything that wasn't in use had to be packed away. There's no room otherwise. I suppose that's one reason why so pernickety now in having things lying around. Old habits die hard. Having climbed up the new staircase, which is straight, this part is original, and that used to bend and veer round to the right, very tiny and narrow. And now I'm standing in what used to be my parents' bedroom, and this used to be Geoff and I's. Well, call it a bedroom, we call it the landing. No door on. Used to be a screen here. And then it would go into the landing bedroom, whatever you like to call it. Again, very small. Just enough room for a bed and a little chest of drawers at the side. Where the chest of drawers used to stand. Now a little window, which we used to look outside over me, hey, and no houses or anything. Bottle kills, goodness knows what. No lights up here, of course. We used to bring candles up. Thought nothing of it. Thought we were height of luxury. And here we have the cupboard built over the stairs, which my parents had built so my brother and I could put out some of our clothes in. Used to have chamber pots, of course, under the bed, which was emptied the next morning without fail. Electric light of course wasn't there, and then used to lead into my parents' bedroom, which again was very tiny. Like and how small. I used to have a camp bed down there. But at that time my grandma or little Ma used to live with us. And my parents' bed. Again very tiny. Ceiling would only be 7 foot high. Again no light. Although my memory serves me right, I think there was actually gas up here, gas mantle. There originally would be nothing. Tiny little window looking outside. And then the chimney breast, which of course contained the fireplace for upstairs. And the shelf. Again, not very large at all. Roughly the same measurement as the kitchen downstairs, might be slightly bigger. Always remember my mother wanting the ceiling below repairing, and in those days it was all landlords and it was all crumbling. So what did she do? She came and jumped on the bed until the leg went through the ceiling, and then went downstairs and got a broom and banged away at the ceiling till it collapsed, then fetched the landlord. It had the desired effect. A step into the shop. Used to be one sink and a fitting there. And there were the hairdresser's mirrors and the open fireplace.
I'll leave it for now, thanks.
Alright. Little radio here. My dad always used to stand and check his watch, wait for the pips to open. Forms and seats, hairdressers' chairs, and in those days there was a petition as you came in, at least how it finished anyway. Petitioned that off so you didn't actually come right on the street. Used to be another sink there.
2 or 3.
2 chairs. We used to do shaving as well as hairdressing initially. One time did ladies. Very blunt person. And during the wartime we had a shutter made for this window to black out, etc. And also to stop people who were either drunk or coming from the local hop, the local jig, if they fell on the window, would fall on the wood. A very clever idea, instead of falling through the window and breaking it. And opposite of course the Union Hotel, which in those days was frequented by a lot of commercial travellers. Again very tiny.
They told you how long it will be?
No.
Very similar to the measurements upstairs. Used to have a periodical every day, 2 newspapers covered both political sides. So the Daily Herald and also the Daily Express. There'll be 2. One notice that used to say, gentlemen attended at their own residence. Gentlemen, please be careful not to take the wrong hat, and singeing promotes the growth of the hair. Hard to think that before long this will be demolished and replaced. by a modern office development. Although in fairness, I believe now this is one of the oldest cottages in, which is all it was, in Longton. And in fairness, before the First World War, all this block should have been demolished for road widening. And we moved that quickly in the potteries. Here we are in 1989 and it's still standing. Gladstone Museum, Longton. And like the famous Prime Minister, this pottery became all that famous. Typical of its time. The St James's Church just above. And the main road, just as it's always been. Factories either side and small houses and shops. Nestling alongside the factories is always a pub. It's hard to visualise now. That small area once contained the Vulcan pub. Very tiny indeed. What tales could be told in there. Building behind. It's now the next class, but at that time that's part of the complex. Little grate, the archway, the gargoyle above, all typical of the period. The bottle killed one of the hundreds, in fact there used to be over 2,000 potteries popping out of the roof. Some of them did, some of them were freestanding and some of them were enamel killers. All shapes and sizes and different height. The little building on the opposite side of the road used to be the old blacksmiths. Used to shod the horses there. Used to be tethered up down at the back. Hard to visualise now. It's turned into plumbing and electrical, but the building is exactly the same as it was. The beautiful smell you used to get when they used to shoe the horses on the open fire. And again next to it and opposite the Gladstone Museum was yet another pub. It used to be called the Castle Inn. And then beyond that, what used to be multiple little shops and a bakery and yet another factory all the way up the road as far as the eye could see.
Classic English person riding his bike.
Opposite once again what used to be Wharf Street, Engine Bank as it was called. The car park on the right used to be where the wharf was. Came down from Mossfield Quarry, right on the horizon. Just about to make out Tuscan Works back there. Another Royal Tuscan, another old factory. Our HMSL plant, one of the many family concerns in this area. They would load up those horse and cart. And the horses and carts would come up this bank, take the wares. In this case it will be coal to the various factories which are dotted all over the place. Longton or Chinatown, heart of the China industry. Looking down what used to be the shops, pie shop, toy shop, shoe shop, clothes shop, cobblers, newsagents, hairdressers, fruit shop and chip shop, and down into the town itself. Another pub and hotel. Very typical of this area and completely unaltered. As I said, there were various types of kilns of all sizes. This one would be an enamel kiln. It would be a biscuit kiln, glass kiln. Well, this one was an enamel after it's been decorated. The building which is now Staffordshire Crystal. Obviously at one time belonged to the factory, but in my time was the home of S. Evans and Son Funeral Undertaker. Just about make the old sign out on the wall there. That also was typical of that period, all the names painted on the side of the wall. A little bit farther along Chadwick Street, just make out all the various bottle kilns. Those of course contained in the central yard of every factory. And this would be quite a large house for its time and would house the pottery manager. Now we have another view of the same kilns farther along Chadwick Street. Of course you wouldn't be able to see any of this at one time because in the front were all little terraced houses, cheek by jowl. The various shops behind where people worked. The top of the wall where you see the broken glass, that too was typical of the period. This was put there to keep intruders out. And believe me, no one very rarely went inside or even thought of it in those days. Once again we have a different view of the bottle ovens. a freestanding one, as well as the ones coming out of the roof. Smoke used to belch out of these and you couldn't see at all. These were the conditions which people lived and worked in at that time. Hard to visualise now. Yet another view of the ovens of the Gladstone Museum, together with the Roslin, of course, which are next to the Gladstone 12 months, 18 months ago. The running of the museum taken over by the local city council. It's making difficulty making ends meet. The symbol of the pottery is the bottle ovens. Also nestling next to the factories, which you see here, under repair, Hudson and Middleton's. Terraced houses by the hundreds. And in some cases, on the wall will be court number 2 or court number 1. Down the entry were further houses and little courtyard. It's also typical of the area. All now unfortunately falling into states of disrepair. The owner of this one, Chelson Works, in order to repair these and bring them back into a decent state. Certainly has an air of dereliction about it at the moment. This whole area is being considered as a conservation area, being very adjacent to the Gladstone Museum. Once again, the public house, as used to be. Here we have a perfect shot of the area. The church, steeple there, tower, seen behind the bottle kilns. This is a view that you wouldn't have been able to see years ago. This is taken from the bridge near Longton Park. There's a bottle kiln standing out. St James's Church. Need to cloud over and mist over. Should just about be able to make it out. And of course, Longton Park itself. Behind that, should just about be able to make out Florence Colliery. There's the tower and the pit head. The end of an era. 1991, I'm sorry. At long last, all that remains of number 5 High Street. Demolished after threats for years and years and years. Number 5, 7 and 9 disappear to make way for a new office block. The end of an era, as far as I'm concerned. All that can be made out is the outlook